start this week by looking at the assignment sheet for Essay 1. You can find that, of course, in the content section under Essential Course Documents. So we have the Essay 1 assignment right here. Go ahead and click on it. You can download it if you'd like and look at it in Microsoft Word. But here's the essay. Hopefully you've had a chance to look this over and think about it. And hopefully we'll answer any questions that you have today. So in the 21st century, literacy means more than simply the ability to read and write. It means being able to communicate in a variety of contexts using a variety of languages, verbal, visual, written, oral, etc. And I'll explain what that stuff means here in a minute. In order to explore what the word literacy means and what literacy means to us, students will write a narrative essay for an audience of their peers in which they explore a significant event that shaped their own literacy and its impact on their lives. You may write any instructor-approved narrative, but you are strongly advised to begin your writing process by considering one or more of the inquiry questions below. You'll have plenty of time to look at those in a little bit if you haven't looked at them yet. But let's talk a little bit about what all of these things mean. So what you're going to be doing for Essay 1 is exploring a type of literacy that you have. So in order to think about that, let's think first about what the word literacy means, and second about what the word narrative means. These are obviously the two most important things that you'll need to know in order to write a literacy narrative. So first, literacy. First of all, literacy, really just to boil it down, the ability to use specific types of language in specific contexts to communicate to specific audiences, right? So any kind of language that you use to communicate. Generally speaking, the first of those is language, but there are lots of different things. So there are many types of literacy. These are just a few, but there's the linguistic literacy of reading, writing, or speaking a language like English, Spanish, or even like binary code or something like that. Sign language, right? If you're using language to make words to communicate and things like that, it's kind of a linguistic literacy, right? Then there's also visual literacy. So we understand things visually, right? We can understand a painting or a dance, right? We can interpret that, cinematography of a movie, photography, things like that. Understanding and using certain visual modes of communication is a type of literacy as well. You might be very familiar with that and explore that. Then there's also cultural literacy, right? The ability to understand the codes and rules of cultural behaviors. So, for instance, football, right? If you don't understand football, it's a really confusing game to try to watch. If you've ever sat with somebody that didn't know the game and tried to explain it to them, it gets really complicated. So that's a type of cultural literacy. Football is a language that you may or may not speak, right? As is any sport. Then there's just like etiquette. That's another type of cultural language, a type of cultural literacy, right? If you know to take your hat off when you walk in the door, right, of a place, something like that, or to keep your elbows off the table when you're eating, right? Rules of the road, right? Knowing how to handle a four-way stop is a type of literacy. So these are just some of the many different types of literacies that we encounter all the time, but hopefully this will get you thinking about things that you might want to explore with this paper. So what are something to think about? What are the literacies that you practice every day? Just take a second, maybe jot down some ideas and think about all the different languages that you speak. We all speak a lot of them, and sometimes we don't necessarily notice or think about that. So that's the first question to kind of ask yourself right now. What are the different literacies you practice every day? In terms of the second word we need to know for assignment 1, narrative. A narrative, of course, is just telling a good story. And I will be blogging this week about narratives and about telling good stories. So I'll let you read my blog for some really good detailed information about this stuff. But just the basics, good stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So your paper is going to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? Maybe not once upon a time, and then end with they lived happily ever after, but something like that, right? You want to have a good structure to your story. If you ever listen to somebody tell a story that they just sort of trail off at the end, it's a cool story, bro, right? We want to tell good stories with beginning, middles, and end. Really good stories explore small moments to show how they have huge impacts. So what you're really thinking about here is a moment when your ability to speak a certain language, to communicate in a certain way, had a larger impact towards you being who you are. or becoming the person that you are. So these are the sorts of things you want to think about. What are those little moments that mean a whole lot, right? Good stories then also use vivid language to show the audience what happened rather than just telling them that something happened. So this is something you're going to hear over and over and over again in your life as writers. Show, don't tell, right? There is a difference between saying it was a dark and stormy night versus saying it was raining, right? One of those is showing me using good language. And we'll talk more about that. I'll be blogging about that, and we'll work on that as you start to draft your essays. So right now, think about what stories do you have about the languages that you speak? What are some stories that you might be able to tell that might help you create this literacy narrative? Once you've done a little bit of thinking about the questions that we've asked you there, what are the different languages you speak, and what are some stories you might be able to tell about them, then you'll be ready to go and do this week's discussion post, which the first one needs to be done by Wednesday. So to do that, you go to discussions over here, and it's very simple. If you haven't done discussion posts before, you'll do plenty of them. You click on the first discussion, so you have here's the assignment. So first you're going to identify at least 2 different literacies that you possess. Maybe they're linguistic, maybe visual, cultural, or something else, you know. Are you a dancer? Are you a football player? Are you an artist? Are you a singer? You know, any number of things, right? Do you have really good manners? I don't know. So which of these seem like the most interesting to you? So identify 2 and then pick one, right? And then choose one of the inquiry questions that's on the assignment sheet. So the assignment sheet has several questions, and write a discussion post that answers that question about one of the literacies that you've identified. So once you identify which one is most interesting, then you're going to pick one of the inquiry questions from the assignment sheet and write a paragraph or so, 1 to 2 paragraphs, in which you answer that question, right? Start to answer that question. And that's going to get you going, right? Here we're doing some brainstorming for Essay 1. After you've all posted your discussion posts, these need to be done by Wednesday, then read your classmates, and by Friday, comment on at least one other student's post and ask him or her a question about what they've posted, a question that you think will help them kind of further develop their ideas, right? So in order to do this, what you need to do is you just go to start a new thread, right? And you'll say, I mean, you can title it whatever you want. My literacies, right? Is a good start. And then you'll list 2. So for me, I like to think that I have a visual literacy, and I also am a big fan of, let's see, rock and roll, right? I have a rock and roll literacy, right? So those would be the 2 things that I identified. Most interesting of these to me, what do you think? I think rock and roll, right? That'll be the one I write about. And then I would write my discussion post examining something from the inquiry questions. So, you know, how I developed this literacy, right? Once I'm done, you can, you know, just blah, 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 right? And once you're done with that, you just say post, and it's posted. Right, so then you can all see that. Everybody can come in and see that. And then to comment on somebody's thread, you'll click on it, and you can reply to thread. Right, cool, bro. Well, we want more than that. What is your favorite song? So maybe that might help me identify that moment. Remember, if a narrative hinges on a moment that has greater significance, maybe just talking about my favorite song would be an element that I could explore in my narrative. So there's a reply. I've replied to the thing. I post that. Boom. And then I can go back to the topic, back to everything we see. I've got 1 post here about my literacies, and it has 1 reply. So I can see all of this stuff by clicking on it, right? That's how you use the discussion board. That's what you'll need to do. So that's the assignment for this week's first discussion. Let's real quick look at your to-do list. It's pretty simple, and you can go ahead and get to work. So this week, pretty simple. Do your discussion board by Wednesday. You have to do your original post, and then you'll reply to somebody's by Friday. do your reading quizzes by Friday, and do your blog by Friday. And when I say by Friday, midnight, by midnight on Friday, or by midnight on Wednesday for the discussion posts, okay? So get to work, let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing what you guys are brainstorming and thinking about.